There comes a moment in every relationship when one person tries to control the distance. They believe that if they can just keep space, if they can hold back, if they can manage how much they give and how much they receive, then somehow they'll remain safe. But let me tell you the truth. When you fight to control the distance, what you're really showing is that you've already lost control of your feelings. Because love doesn't demand management. Love demands presence. Avoidants convince themselves that pulling back is power. That silence is strength. That distance is safety. But what's happening underneath? The emotions they're trying to contain are expanding like fire within them. And no matter how far they run, the fire doesn't die, it grows stronger. That's because emotions are not problems to be solved, they are signals of the deepest part of the human soul calling out to be heard. Think about it, every time a person pulls away, every time they create space, what happens? Do their feelings fade? No, they intensify. The very thing they fear, the bond, the connection, the pull, is strengthened by their attempt to resist it. And that's the paradox. The act of running is proof of the power of the attachment. So here's the breakthrough. Control is an illusion. You don't control love. You don't control attraction. You don't control the soul's hunger to connect. You can bury it, silence it, run from it, but you cannot kill it. And the longer you try, the more it owns you. Love was never meant to be caged. Love was meant to expand. It was meant to grow, to stretch, to heal. When you hold it back, it's like holding your breath. You can do it for a while, but eventually your soul will gasp for air. And when that moment comes, no amount of distance will protect you from what your heart already knows. You are not meant to live in isolation. The real power doesn't come from pushing people away. The real power comes from leaning in, from choosing vulnerability, from saying, I'm scared, but I'm here. That's where transformation happens. That's where intimacy becomes the bridge to freedom. And that's where love stops being something you fear and becomes something that fuels you. Because the truth is, when avoidants try to control the distance, what they're really doing is exposing the depth of their feelings. They're showing how much they care, how much they feel, how much they're already attached. And the moment they stop fighting that truth, the moment they embrace it, life changes. Love changes. Everything changes. So I invite you, stop running from what you feel. Stop controlling what was never meant to be controlled. Let go of the distance. Step into the fire of connection. Because that's not where you lose yourself. That's where you finally discover who you really are. When someone who carries avoidant tendencies tries to manage the space in a relationship, what they are really doing is building a wall to protect themselves from what feels overwhelming. That wall, the distance they create, isn't truly about the other person. It's about their own fear of being consumed by emotions they can't fully understand or control. They believe that by pulling back, they are choosing strength, independence, and self-preservation. But underneath, what's actually happening is the exact opposite. That distance becomes a defense mechanism, a shield, a way to regulate discomfort rather than an authentic solution to what they are feeling. It doesn't resolve their emotions, it simply postpones the confrontation with them. And the longer they avoid, the more powerful those feelings become in the shadows. It's important to recognize that avoidance of closeness is not about a lack of care. Often it is about too much care, so much care that it feels dangerous. When someone is afraid of being hurt, rejected, or losing themselves, distance looks like a safe strategy. It's like standing near the edge of a cliff and choosing to step back before you fall. But the irony is, love and connection were never cliffs to begin with. They were bridges. And stepping back doesn't keep you safe, it keeps you stuck. Every time an avoidant distances themselves, they trade the possibility of genuine closeness for the illusion of safety. That illusion may calm them in the moment, but it robs them of the growth, healing, and intimacy that could transform their life. Distance is not a solution because it doesn't address the core issue, it simply hides it. Imagine trying to hold back a tidal wave with your hands. You can resist for a second, maybe two, but eventually the force will overwhelm you. That's exactly what happens emotionally. The more someone resists what they feel, the more energy it takes to keep that resistance alive. It drains them. It leaves them tense, unsettled, and restless. They may appear calm on the outside, but inside their emotions are rumbling like thunder, waiting to be released. The defense mechanism then becomes its own prison. When we try to manage relationships with distance, we miss the deeper truth. Emotions are not meant to be controlled. They are meant to be experienced. They carry wisdom, direction, and signals of what matters most to us. By pulling away, avoidants silence that wisdom. They tell themselves they are in charge, but in reality, they are being controlled by the very emotions they deny. And here's the key. They wouldn't need to build distance if they didn't already feel the power of those emotions. The act of creating space is the proof that the emotions exist, that they are strong, and that they matter. So while distance feels like control, it is actually evidence of vulnerability. It's the body and the mind saying, I care so much that I don't know how to handle it. That's why distance is not a true solution. It doesn't lessen the bond, it strengthens it. It doesn't erase the feelings, it amplifies them. It doesn't create peace, it creates conflict within the self. At some point, the avoidant must face the reality that what they are running from is not the other person. It's their own heart, their own fear, and their own longing for connection. The deeper truth is this distance is only a temporary refuge. It is never the final answer, because the human soul was not designed to live behind walls. It was designed to love, to connect, and to be transformed by closeness. The longer someone relies on distance, the louder their emotions become until they can no longer be ignored. And when that moment comes, they discover that what they thought was control was only a mask for the very feelings they were afraid to embrace. The illusion of control is one of the greatest deceptions avoidants fall into. They believe that if they can control the distance, they can control the relationship. If they can set the terms of closeness, if they can dictate when to lean in and when to pull back, then somehow they hold the power. But the truth is, this kind of control is not real power. It's fear wearing the mask of power. It may look like strength to decide when to engage and when to withdraw, but underneath it is driven by a desperate attempt to manage feelings that are already bigger than them. Control is attractive to the mind because it offers the illusion of certainty. If you can predict, if you can manage, if you can decide, then you believe you are safe. Avoidants think that by holding back, they are protecting themselves from rejection, disappointment, or pain. They convince themselves that if they never fully surrender, they can't fully lose. But love does not bend to rules. Love does not operate on the terms of distance. The human heart cannot be tricked into silence, and the soul cannot be negotiated with. The very act of creating space reveals that what they are feeling is uncontrollable. If there was no power in those emotions, there would be no need to resist them. What avoidance teaches us is that control is often a cover for fear. The avoidant is not really in control. They are reacting to their own vulnerability. The more they try to suppress their emotions, the more enslaved they become to them. It is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You can push it down, but the energy it takes to keep it there only grows. The harder you press, the stronger it fights to resurface. Eventually, it bursts out with even more force than before. This is what happens when avoidants insist on distance. The emotions they try to hide begin to dominate their inner world. They think they're winning by pulling back, but in reality, they're losing because they're being ruled by what they refuse to face. Real power is not about control. It's about alignment. It's about aligning with truth, with love, with the courage to be vulnerable. The attempt to control closeness is a denial of that truth. And every denial makes the feeling stronger, not weaker. Think about it, the more someone insists they don't care, the more evidence there is that they actually do. If they were indifferent, they wouldn't need walls. If they were unaffected, they wouldn't need to pull away. The distance itself is the proof of attachment. This illusion of control is seductive because it gives temporary relief. In the short term, pulling back feels like a victory. It calms the nervous system. It creates space to breathe. But it's not healing, it's postponement. It's not resolution, it's avoidance. And when the emotions return, and they always return, they come back stronger than before. That's because the human heart was not designed for half measures. It does not settle for calculated doses of intimacy. It longs for wholeness, for depth, for the full experience of connection. So when avoidants try to control the distance, they're stepping into a trap of their own making. The trap is that the very thing they are running from is the very thing that has already taken hold of them. The person they are trying to keep at arm's length is already in their heart. The feelings they are trying to manage are already alive, already growing, already shaping their choices. And the more they fight it, the more those feelings prove their strength. At some point, the illusion shatters. They realize that no amount of space can erase the bond, no amount of silence can quiet the heart, and no amount of control can rewrite the truth of what they feel. The attempt to manage love becomes the evidence that love has already taken root. What looked like control was never control at all. It was fear, it was longing, it was vulnerability dressed in the disguise of distance. The truth about emotions is that they cannot be outrun. You can bury them, silence them, or try to drown them in distraction, but they remain. They wait, they whisper beneath the surface, reminding you of what you tried to escape. Avoidants often believe that by pulling away and creating distance, they can suppress their feelings long enough for them to fade. They imagine that if they don't feed the connection, it will starve to death. But emotions do not starve. They grow in silence. They gather strength in the spaces where they are ignored. The very act of running from them gives them power, because attention is not the only thing that fuels emotions. Resistance does too. When someone tries to deny what they feel, they are essentially waging war with their own heart. That battle can last days, months, even years, but is always unwinnable. Emotions are not logical strategies that can be outsmarted. They are truths that live in the body, in the subconscious, in the soul. They don't disappear because you turn your back on them. They don't fade just because you pretend they're not there. They show up in your thoughts, in your dreams, in the tension you carry in your chest. They rise when you see the person you tried to avoid, when you hear their voice, when a memory catches you off guard. You can ignore them, but you can't erase them. Think about it like a shadow. No matter how far you walk, no matter how fast you run, your shadow follows. It may stretch, it may shrink, but it never leaves. That's how emotions are. They are the shadow of the heart. Always present, always attached, always following. And the harder you try to run from them, the more obvious they become. Avoidants often convince themselves that emotional distance is victory, that silence is strength, that withholding is control. But what happens in those quiet moments when no one else is around? Their emotions find them. They slip in through the cracks of stillness. They flood the mind with questions, with longing, with unspoken truths. And suddenly, the very feelings they try to outrun are standing at the door of their consciousness, demanding to be acknowledged. This is why avoidance never works. It only delays the inevitable confrontation with the self. The human soul is designed to feel. That's not weakness, it's design. Emotions are not accidents. They are signals pointing us toward what matters. When someone tries to run from those signals, they're essentially turning away from their own compass. They lose direction, they lose clarity, and they lose the opportunity to heal. What avoidants discover, often too late, is that you cannot protect yourself from emotions without also cutting yourself off from joy, from intimacy, from connection. You cannot numb selectively. When you try to silence the pain, you silence the passion. When you try to avoid fear, you also avoid love. That's the great cost of running. You don't just lose the discomfort, you lose the beauty too. And here's the paradox: the more you resist emotions, the stronger they become. They grow in the dark. They thrive on the energy of denial. What could have been processed, understood, and integrated in a moment becomes an ever-expanding storm inside you. That storm will not rest until it is faced. This is why so many avoidants, after months or years of holding back, suddenly break. The floodgates open, and the emotions they try to silence come crashing down with overwhelming force. It's not because the feelings suddenly appeared. It's because they had been there all along, waiting for the resistance to weaken. The sooner we realize that emotions are not enemies, but teachers, the freer we become. To run from them is to live in chains. To face them is to step into freedom. Avoidants try to control their world by controlling distance, but emotions are not contained by walls. They seep through every crack, they live in every silence, they outlast every attempt to flee. And in the end, no matter how far you run, they are still there, waiting for you to stop so they can finally be heard. Love has a way of breaking through every barrier that humans try to build. It is one of the most unstoppable forces in existence because it is not bound by logic, fear, or even time. Avoidants believe that by creating distance, they can put a lid on love, contain it, keep it from spilling over into the places that feel unsafe. But love was never meant to be contained. It is not fragile. It does not shrink when ignored. It expands. It grows in silence. It thrives even when it is resisted, because love is not a fleeting feeling. It is a fundamental energy of the human soul. When someone tries to run from love, they often find themselves running right back into it in ways they never expected. They see reminders everywhere, in a song that plays unexpectedly, in a place that holds memories, in the smallest details of daily life. They cannot escape because love exists beyond physical presence. It is not limited by whether two people are together or apart. Love imprints itself on the heart, and that imprint cannot be erased by distance. The avoidant may try to deny it, but every denial only reinforces its presence. Every attempt to silence it becomes an admission that it exists and that it matters. The barriers avoidants build are not walls against love. They are walls against vulnerability. Love itself is never the enemy. What they fear is being exposed, being seen, being open in ways they cannot control. Vulnerability feels like surrender, and surrender feels like danger. But here is the truth. Love doesn't break people. It breaks patterns. It breaks the chains of fear. It breaks the lies that say you are safer alone. It breaks the illusion that closeness will destroy you. In reality, love is the very thing that heals the wounds those fears are built upon. What avoidants discover over time is that their strategies cannot outwit love. They may hold back, they may suppress, they may withdraw, but love continues to knock. It finds its way through the cracks of silence. It speaks in the language of longing, in the ache of absence, in the undeniable pull toward connection. And no matter how carefully someone tries to control it, love insists on being felt. Because love does not care about defenses, it exists to dissolve them. Every attempt to control distance is really an attempt to keep love at bay. Yet the irony is that distance amplifies love rather than diminishes it. When two souls are bonded, absence makes the connection more vivid. The silence becomes louder than words. The heart feels the pull more intensely in the very moments when closeness is denied. That is because love was designed to draw people together, not to push them apart. Avoidance may create temporary space, but it cannot erase the gravitational pull of true connection. And the more love pushes against those barriers, the more it exposes what lies behind them. It reveals the fear, the longing, the deep desire to be close even when closeness feels dangerous. This is why love is so powerful. It forces people to confront themselves. It doesn't just bond one soul to another. It brings you face to face with your own truth. It asks, will you let yourself be seen? Will you let yourself be loved? Will you finally stop running from what you were made for? That is the divine nature of love. It doesn't destroy, it transforms. It transforms fear into courage, resistance into surrender, distance into intimacy. And no matter how hard avoidants try to control the space, love will always find a way to break through. Because love is not a weakness to be managed. It is the greatest strength a human being can embrace. The very thing they try to escape is the very thing their soul longs for. And no amount of distance can silence that call. What feels like control in the hands of an avoidant is often surrender in disguise. The moment someone insists on creating distance, they believe they are exercising power, making a choice, taking the reins of the relationship. But if you look deeper, what is actually happening is that the connection has already reached them at a level they can't contain. The act of pushing away is not a sign of mastery. It is a reaction to being overwhelmed. It is not dominance over emotions. It is evidence that emotions have already claimed their ground. Distance, then, is not power at all. It is the desperate attempt to regain balance when feelings have grown too strong to deny. Avoidants often mistake withdrawal for strength. They convince themselves that silence is a strategy, that withholding is leadership, that keeping space is protection. But if it truly were strength, they wouldn't feel the need to pull away in the first place. If feelings were small, there would be no urgency to contain them. The very fact that they run is the proof that their emotions are already in charge. What feels like taking control is actually losing it, because the deeper truth is this: you only try to control what already controls you. This is the turning point of power, when someone realizes that every attempt to hold back, every effort to keep distance, every strategy to manage closeness is nothing more than proof of how much the other person already matters. Distance doesn't weaken the bond, it highlights it. Silence doesn't erase emotions, it amplifies them. What avoidance experiences power is actually surrender to the intensity of what they feel. They are not managing love, they are being managed by it. Think about how fire behaves when you try to contain it. You can put it in a box, try to shut it in, but inside that box it burns hotter, stronger, more fiercely. Eventually, the fire bursts through, uncontrolled and undeniable. That is exactly what happens when avoidants try to manage emotions with distance. Their feelings intensify in the silence. Their thoughts circle endlessly around what they are trying to avoid. Their heart pulls harder toward what they claim to resist. The illusion of control crumbles because the emotions were never tamed. They were simply pressed into a corner where they could only grow. This is why avoidance never brings peace. The more space someone creates, the louder their heart becomes. The more they try to suppress, the more their body feels the tension of what has been denied. It shows up in restless thoughts, in sleepless nights, in the ache of longing that refuses to disappear. And when they finally recognize this, it becomes clear. What looked like control was really surrender all along. The distance did not protect them, it exposed them. It revealed that their emotions were strong enough to dictate their behavior, even against their own logic and will. The real turning point comes when they stop pretending that distance is power and begin to see it for what it is: fear masquerading as strength. True power does not come from running away from connection. True power comes from leaning into it, from choosing to stay present even when it feels uncomfortable, from admitting the truth of what you feel instead of building walls to hide it. The surrender that once looked like weakness becomes freedom when it is conscious. Because when you consciously surrender to love, it is no longer about losing control. It is about choosing courage. So what appears as control in the life of an avoidant is really the sign that love has already reached them. They are not keeping emotions at bay. They are living proof of how deeply those emotions are shaping them. And once they accept that reality, they discover that their greatest power is not in holding back, but in allowing themselves to step forward into the very closeness they once resisted. Real freedom is never found in control and distance or in carefully managed walls. Real freedom is born in vulnerability. It is born in the courage to let someone in, to let yourself be seen, to admit that you care more deeply than words can ever capture. Avoidants spend so much of their lives believing that freedom means independence, that safety means distance, that strength means self-sufficiency. But what they don't realize is that these are prisons disguised as protection. Isolation doesn't set you free. It keeps you locked in patterns of fear. True liberation comes when you stop running, when you stop hiding, when you embrace the rawness of intimacy and allow love to transform you. Vulnerability is often misunderstood as weakness. To the avoidant, it feels like exposure, like losing power, like handing someone else the keys to their heart. But in reality, vulnerability is strength in its purest form. It takes no courage to hide. It takes no bravery to pull back. What requires true power is standing in your truth without guarantees, without certainty, and without control. When you say, "Here I am, this is me, with all my fears and flaws," you are choosing strength over fear, authenticity over illusion. That choice creates the foundation for freedom, because you are no longer bound by the need to protect an image or a facade. You are living in the light of truth, and truth always sets you free. When avoidants stop trying to control distance and begin to embrace vulnerability, something miraculous happens. The walls they thought kept them safe, the safe begin to crumble, and in their place, connection flourishes. The very closeness they feared becomes the doorway to healing. The intimacy they resisted becomes the path to peace. By opening themselves to another person, they discover that love is not here to take away their strength, it is here to multiply it. Vulnerability doesn't weaken them, it expands them. It deepens their capacity to love, to be loved, and to live fully. The paradox is that the control avoidants fight so hard to hold on to is the very thing that keeps them trapped. By letting go, by surrendering, by embracing vulnerability, they gain the freedom they were chasing all along. They no longer have to calculate when to lean in or when to pull back. They no longer have to monitor every feeling or micromanage every moment of intimacy. They can simply be. They can allow love to flow without conditions. They can experience the joy of connection without the constant burden of fear. That is freedom, not the absence of closeness, but the presence of fearless love. And this freedom is not just about relationships with others, it is also about the relationship with oneself. When you embrace vulnerability, you stop running from your own emotions. You stop treating your heart as the enemy. You allow yourself to feel, to heal, to grow. You begin to see that your emotions are not here to destroy you, but to guide you toward what matters most. By allowing yourself to be vulnerable, you reclaim the parts of yourself that distance kept hidden. You integrate your fears instead of denying them. You find wholeness where avoidance once created division. The deepest transformation happens when avoidants realize that the walls they built to protect themselves have also kept them from experiencing the fullness of life. And the moment they let those walls fall, they discover that closeness is not something to fear, it is something to celebrate. Vulnerability becomes the key that unlocks the door to real strength, real freedom, and real connection. Because in the end, the greatest power a person can have is not in controlling love, but in allowing themselves to be transformed by it. At the end of the day, distance was never power, and control was never freedom. The true strength lies in choosing love, embracing vulnerability, and allowing yourself to be fully present in the connection your soul has been longing for all along. When you stop running from your feelings and start leaning into them, you don't lose yourself. You discover yourself at a deeper level than ever before. Thank you for giving me the honor of walking with you through these truths, and may you carry this wisdom into your life with courage, clarity, and the unshakable belief that love will always be your greatest teacher.